Hello my friends, it's me, Cruel Swords, and I'm here to read you a bedtime story. Now before we begin, I would like you to check that your phone is charging, because I don't want you to miss work tomorrow and then your boss get on to me and say that I'm the cause of you being tardy and not getting in on time. So please make sure that you've got your phone charged. And if you have a separate alarm clock, that is now set. I can give you a moment while you're getting that done. I'll still be here. Okay, are you settled in? Good. Well, let's begin. This story is called The Wizard Who Went to the Supermarket. Once upon a time, in a supermarket, far, far away, a wizard by the name of Fred was doing his weekly shop. He was trying to wean himself off the bigger chain stores and buy produce in the local witch and wizard shops. But sometimes he would wander in and see if he could find discounts on newt eyes, organic hog tusks, or something similar. Today, though, he was having little luck. The batwings were out of season and prohibitively expensive, and would probably not be as potent, so any potion would likely be ineffective. To make matters worse, the magic jotters came only in bright neon, or marine blue, and those kind of colours were totally at odds with the murky atmosphere of his subterranean dwelling. It might look okay in his timeshare on the coast, but he wasn't about to buy the jotters for a place he only had 3 weeks of the year. The villagers were often heard calling him mad and threatening to burn him out of his home, and if he were to buy those jotters, he would have to concede they may have a point. No, they would have to stay on the shelf, and you would have to go to the books and incantation store to find the right kind of jotter, even if it meant paying a little bit more. Now you might be wondering to yourself why he wouldn't buy a spell book and leave the jotters damn well alone. Well, you see, spell books are expensive, and until you know exactly how to phrase and conjure up a spell, you need to practice, and a magic jotter is far more economical than throwing out a half-finished spell book full of mistakes. Anyway, don't be so quick to judge, my dear friends. Everything has its logic, and Fred is a wizard of considerable knowledge and skill. But even so, our Fred had doubts about his wizardry. He had already broken 5 wands in the last month, and as he perused the aisle looking for another set, he couldn't help feeling he didn't have the knack for buying or telling quality wands from their inferior counterparts. Ever since last year, the stores have been flooded with cheap, hastily made wands that would likely leave you completely fecked if you were surrounded by a hateful crowd armed with pitchforks and pickaxes. In fact, this very thing happened to a wizard friend of Fred's only 2 weeks before. And now, that same friend was sucking his food through a tube and may never utter another spell ever again. Life was indeed getting harder for wizards and witches. The people were turning away from magic and seeking solace in various religious creeds. Faith, that was the big thing now, and a wizard was fast becoming yesterday's man. The witches were hardly faring any better, because it seemed like nearly every day Fred would be attending the burning of a friend and sneakily using some magic in order to make the ordeal a little less painful for the one going up in flames. With the threat of death becoming more common in the villages, many of his kind were now moving to the cities. At least there one had more anonymity and could practice white magic or the dark arts without raising much suspicion. In the cities you might be considered eccentric, but in some of the villages you were likely to be accused of devil worship. Devil worship. The thought would be laughable if it wasn't so likely to get you in trouble. After all, who needs a devil when you have the powers of a witch or a wizard? Why take your orders from some creep with horns hiding in the hearts of men when you can live independently and as you choose? It didn't do Fred much good to whip himself into another frenzy, so he brought his mind back to the task at hand and went down another aisle towards the pre-spelled dinners and microwavable potions. Of course, the dinners were terrible, and the potions hardly ever worked. But sometimes Fred just didn't feel like blowing the dust off an old spell book and reciting ancient texts and trying to decipher the almost indecipherable words of his old master, Cumbert the Wrinkly. His master used to foretell the end of magic. Fred would listen to him and take amusement from how animated the old wizard would get, and on his broom home he would laugh to himself and he would say, "I won't turn into such a silly reactionary." But it seemed now that the old man was right. Magic had no place in this age of theology. They were lining up to enter the seminaries, but when was the last time he heard of a graduating magic class with more than 10 witches and wizards? Fred now went to the checkout, paid for his items and left the supermarket. But as he made his way to the Broom Park, he was met by a young woman out of breath. Fred, you must come quick. Young Anthony got his arm stuck in the loom and has lost a lot of blood. You must do something." Fred asked her to catch her breath a moment, and then the two hurriedly made their way to the injured man. When they arrived at the little cottage where Anthony had been brought, the small crowd made way for Fred so he could assess the damage. It was indeed bad, but if he acted quickly, there was a chance Anthony could be saved. Fred ordered the man of the house to place a chicken in a pot of lukewarm water, and asked everyone to look intently at the chicken and not to turn their gaze from it until Fred said so. He told them to recite a prayer too, and think hard about saving the poor fellow. While everyone was kept busy, Fred whispered some words over the wound and took out a roll of dragon tongue, which he had purchased at the supermarket, and wrapped some of it around the arm. He then took a log burning in the fireplace and set the tongue alight. It glowed bright red, but held firm. Then, after 5 recitations of the prayer, Fred peeled the tongue back, placed it in his bag, and looked on his work. A scab had formed over the wound and would heal nicely by the looks of it. All that was left to do was give the man some blood, and Fred did this by prodding Anthony with a blood-filled, universal donor magic mosquito, and squeezed gently on its frame. Everything done and in order, Fred exclaimed that the prayers had worked, and told the crowd to look upon the miracle they had performed together. The crowd were amazed and slapped each other on the backs and cheered loudly. One of them grabbed the chicken, held it up for all to see, and then ran out of the cottage and sang its praises to passers-by. The crowd followed suit. Fred packed away his things and was about to leave when the woman who had come looking for him asked to shake his hand. "Oh, thank you so much for what you did to help Anthony. I hope you won't be upset, but I was watching you the whole time. Why did you lie to the crowd and say they worked a miracle? Won't they now run about idolizing that chicken?" He looked at her and said, "Maybe they will. But I don't want to be chased out of town, and I can still work some magic from time to time under the guise of prayers. Anyway, a man has been saved. Let's be glad of that." I am grateful. I don't want to sound ungrateful. I just had to ask. Thank you again. By the way, when Anthony is better, can we both come and visit you and learn something of your ways?" Fred consented to the request, smiled and left the cottage, headed towards the Broom Park once more. In time, Anthony and his friend learned from Fred the ways of the wizards and the witches, and helped carry the torch of knowledge for another generation. And so they all lived happily ever after. The end. Okay, time to go to bed. Good night.